So it struck me again as Kristen was speaking, um, just the amount of overlap in the underlying role of microbes in all of these ecosystems, and um, the getting the bugs to work for us title. I've used the title "The Other Half of Forested Buffers," and you'll understand why here. Um, but this getting the bugs to work for us, I followed Bob Munson, dairy nutritionist from Penn State, talking about really the work of a dairyman is to feed the microbes in the gut of the dairy animal. And it is the microbes are doing such critical work. And then Steve Groff, who speaks internationally on soil health, he spoke next to this group of dairymen, dairy persons, and spoke of feeding the soil microbes through cover cropping, much as Kristen was referring to. This is a very living system. And I got to speak to these guys. I said, I just realized what I'm here to talk to you about, and it is how to manage the bugs in your streams to get them to work for our society, for the very critical ecosystem services that they provide. And the way you do that is by managing the food inputs that the microbes use in the stream ecosystem. And if you can grasp that metaphor, that similarity, that translation, I think you're really on track for understanding the other half of forested buffers. Our society has understood buffers to be a filter, a barrier, an interceptor for many decades now. I have watched for 2 decades since Stroud published a really seminal piece of research on 16 streams where they were examining stream ecology and stream response to having forests on their bank versus healthy grass buffers. Our society has not absorbed the message that research has put out there, that what is on the banks of the stream utterly transforms what is happening in the biology of the stream itself. In the same manner, and we work with the PA No-Till Alliance quite a bit, I say to Jim Hershey, Jim, if you can talk to your guys about um, trees are to streams as cover crops are to soil health. Trees are to stream health as cover crops are to soil health. There is a profound similarity there. So let's launch into it. Let's see if I can. Here's the Stroud team. Stroud is mostly an academic research facility. We do basic and applied research on stream ecosystems around the world. At one point, we had projects on all 7 continents. So most of these people are PhDs and the technicians which support them. There is an education shop, and I am in the Watershed Restoration shop, which is sort of the applied arm trying to both advance the understandings of how to do restoration through the science that Stroud does, with all the data crunchers and people who can design experiments. But then also applying these insights for real world benefits of getting streams to be healthier. That's the charge of my team that I work with. So knowledge and stewardship of freshwater systems through restoration, education, and research being first and foremost. So a quick outline of where we're going. I'm going to give you some background information, and it's sort of willy-nilly, helter-skelter. There's not really a through-going string. It's just some factoids to be aware of. Second part, I hope, will be a lot more logical and consistent. It's to talk about the energy systems of streams. Once you understand that, you will understand why trees, with streams with trees in their input system are in far better position to do service for our society. Then I'll get into that study, this 2004 Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences study that Stroud did, 16 streams in eastern Pennsylvania, on what difference does it make whether there's trees on the banks or a healthy grass buffer. And then the last point I'll just touch on very briefly, some unseen connections to trees. Just a reminder of the complexity of ecosystems, the limits of human knowledge, and a call to humility and um, a call to be more a mimicker of healthy systems than someone who believes they can engineer from the ground up what a system needs to be because they understand it with totality. That's a level of arrogance that I think we're going to find as a failure for us if we go that route. So that's the quick outline. So some background stuff. Sorry, Texas. Small streams, small things really do matter. It is not all about the big stuff. If your small blood vessels called your capillaries didn't exist, you wouldn't either. The small streams in our watersheds, the stuff we can jump across, this is about 80% of the stream miles in the eastern deciduous forest. We disregard them to our peril. And once those 80% of stream miles coalesce into larger order streams, their trajectory on water quality and stream health is really hard to alter. It gets set and is very difficult to change the trajectory. To try to work on the water quality in the Susquehanna at Harrisburg is, other than working at, combined sewer overflows and stuff, to try to work at it through buffers is a fool's errand at that point. Reminder that stream organisms are highly specialized and they are adapted to forested conditions. For millennia, they have been under the canopy of deciduous trees in our area, mixed deciduous and coniferous as you go farther north. Very simple diagram of a aquatic food web for a stream, and I will point out on the 9 o'clock position, invertebrate shredders. These are specialists that shred the leaves, much as cattle eat forage. This is their niche. On the 3 o'clock position on the diagram, an invertebrate scraper. So you see above him something called epilithic algae. That's a fancy term for algae that grows on rocks. So diatoms, these microscopic, beautifully appointed little single cell algae, they are phenomenal food. It would be sort of the olive product equivalent for the human diet. Really high energy source. The invertebrate scrapers specialize in scraping that stuff. The invertebrate shredders have different mouth parts. They chew whole leaves into small pieces. And then right at the center of the whole works, whoever the artist was, the illustrator, dissolved organic matter is absolutely at the center of things in ways that you will see here in a bit. Then I'll just point out the invertebrate collectors like the black fly larvae that we all know and love in early season New York and Pennsylvania. They are collectors, so they're specialists. When you don't have deciduous tree leaves coming in, the invertebrate shredders are kind of out of luck. When you have too much sunlight to grow diatoms, because they are the ferns of the stream, the invertebrate scrapers are out of luck. The invertebrate collectors generally do pretty well, even in bad streams. You'll have a lot of collectors because they are dealing with the stuff at the end of the process. So, but the point is the specialization. So here's a crane fly. Give you an example of specialization. This maggot on the left lives in the stream, and you'll find these, and they're the size of small shrimp. I suppose were our culture different, we would put a little cocktail sauce and enjoy them. But not for me. So, but it is an amazing bug. It can eat about 5 times its body weight in leaves every day during its active growth period. So it is a leaf-eating machine. Stroud does crazy science. So here's a study. At one point they said, if we're going to do stream restoration, we should know what the bugs are eating. So let's do an experiment to figure out which tree leaves different bugs prefer. So we had crane flies in trays. So these trays, one tray may have nothing but red maple leaf. I'm sorry, they will have a mixture of a whole bunch of different leaves. And then periodically you would go in and check which leaf is the crane fly actively feeding on at that point in time. And when you do this crazy sort of science, you'll find out there is a preference that for this organism, and I won't say, I think you need to be careful, this is not a recommendation to plant sugar maples on all of our streams. Number one, they don't tolerate the soggy soils very well. But number two, uh, while the crane fly may prefer those, a stonefly might not. So the species have differing preferences, but they have a preference. The crane flies would eat the sugar maple leaves till they were gone. They would switch to the red maples, and the last thing they would eat would be the oaks for that organism. Then we do another set of experiments where the crane fly larvae are only fed one particular type of leaf. So in that tray that where the hand is, maybe that's only red oak in there. And the next tray, it's only sugar maple. And then we do a check and find out how are these bugs doing with their growth rates based on what we are feeding them. And we find out, lo and behold, they grow differently on different leaf types. When they are fed only that leaf type, they grow best on sugar maple, and they grow most slowly on red oak. And pretty quickly, you're recalling that's basically the same order, which is to say, these bugs know what they're eating. They have preferences. They optimize their growth by eating those species of leaves which enable them to grow optimally. They are highly specialized. There is a very strong, long history of connection with these species. If you don't give them what they are accustomed to, we might expect that that's not going to do good things for their optimization of their growth and the overall health of the stream ecosystem. And that is in fact the case. So I will also say, just in this background factoid section, I refer to it, I talked to a lot of dairy farmers and beef farmers, and I refer to the invisible herd, the fungi, the bacteria, especially the beneficial bacteria, the diatoms. It is these non-visible members of the aquatic system that does the heavy lift on our water purification, and in many regards dealing with insults from toxins that our behaviors get into the waterways from many different sources, even just, excess nutrients, excess organic matter. But for them to do this work for our society, we are relying on them to be robust and highly efficient and effective. And they can do that for us, but they'll do their best work, not surprisingly, when we give them their preferred conditions. And that is to say, in this Eastern United States context, that is forested conditions. So forested buffers are what optimizes the behaviors and the ecosystem services of this invisible herd that I referred to. So part one, small streams matter. By the time they get to be a third order stream, much of where things are going downstream is already set. Stream organisms are highly adapted to do their best work to need trees, and it is the invisible herd that really is the heavy lift component of water purification for our society. Second part of the talk, I'll refer to as the hidden energy of streams. Found this photograph in the Stroud library, and I just found it so compelling. I figured I got to stick it in somewhere. And you are looking at the source of the hidden energy of streams in this photo. We did talk about diatoms. You know, uh, when I was 16, I worked in a Boy Scout camp. I taught environmental science merit badge and, you know, a nature merit badge, and they all talk about sun producers, photosynthesis as the basis of the food chain. I'm looking in the stream, I'm not seeing green plants. I'm not seeing them in the stream. And there are green plants. They happen to be microscopic. The diatoms are the ferns of the stream. Excellent food source, but it's a small percentage of the overall food source in a stream. Um, if you make the leap, the intellectual leap, that while trees are not in the stream, they are an integral part of the stream ecosystem, you have avoided a pitfall that was part of my early perception of streams. It's like, where are the producers in the stream to fuel this ecosystem? Well, the producers aren't in the stream. The producers are on the banks of the stream, giving their products, leaves, twigs, pollen, solid carbon. Remember, streams are wet depressions in the landscape. We've done the math, and by the end of the season, a stream will have collected 5 times more leaf matter than the surrounding forest floor as leaves blow around and then they hit the stream and they stick and they get incorporated. But that solid carbon is still only about a third of the stream's energy. So thus my comment, the hidden energy of streams, where is the energy coming from to drive a healthy stream system? Yeah, sorry. For those of us in the livestock industry, the silage analogy really becomes valuable to refer to these leaves in the stream. You know, I'm a silage eater, sauerkraut. A lot of our livestock industry is based on silage, and streams also have their silage. So you are looking in this photograph this happens to be from upstate Michigan. You're looking at the main source of food for streams. Can you see it? And the answer is it's the dissolved organic carbon. If you remember that food chain diagram, right at the very center of things, and that's not that, I don't know if the illustrator did that knowledgeably or just happened to work out well, but it is really at the center of things. Dissolved organic carbon is a half or a little bit more than half of the stream's food and energy supply. And we drink tea. Some of us drink it as a stimulant to get through our days. It has a food source. There is amino acids, carbohydrates, proteins in there. It is not just a stimulant, it is also a food source. And in the same fashion, there's a reason that as that water fluxes over that foam, gets some light behind it, there's a reason that that color looks the same as the color out of a tea leaf. It's because it's the same kind of compounds, one coming out of a bush in the Orient, one coming out of a bush and trees in upstate Michigan. So those compounds, and you'll see this if you're paying attention. I went out to the stream behind my place after, this was years ago, after a drought. We got a rain. It was a nice rain, and mostly it was interflow coming through the soils, etc. The stream changed from gin clear the day before to iced tea colored in a matter of 36, 48 hours as that water worked through what had been pent up compounds in those leaves that hadn't seen rain in months, sort of like now. So there's, to give you a pie chart, you know, here's where your energy is coming from in a freestone stream, meaning not a limestoner. Limestoners are different. They're different in many, many ways. Limestoners often do have a lot of producers, you know, macrophytes growing in the channel, but not most of our freestone streams. So to just make this a little more clear how this transition happens, we've got trees producing dissolved organic matter, that watershed tea. The bacteria in the biofilm and the fungi in the biofilm are taking those compounds and using them as energy sources. which becomes food for microscopic bugs, food for bigger bugs, food for fish. That is the energy flow of a stream ecosystem, uh, with us being focused on the larger stuff like the fish as a source of interest. So here's a beautiful brook trout. If you were to look where the carbon atoms in that brook trout come from, they would have come out of that forest in the watershed that produced the streams that have nourished that trout so magnificently. And as a corollary, when you understand that it's the dissolved organic carbon that's really driving stream productivity, stream health, as a corollary, you ask the question, how far from a stream can you plant a tree and benefit the stream? The answer is as far as water flows and is able to carry that watershed tea to the stream. So, not surprisingly or insignificantly, the best indicator of stream health is percent forest cover in the watershed. That's for both pollution avoidance reasons, but it is also very strongly the case that it is because it is that forest that is generating the vibrant biology of the stream through the inputs of dissolved organic matter. So Stroud is a science organization. To get into the science of what difference does it make, forests or no, is this. Here's the landscape in southeastern Pennsylvania, Chester County. The green would be a diagrammatic representation of existing woodlots on the landscape. The white would be agricultural lands. Most of these studies were looking at pastured lands with healthy grass buffers. And not, I grew up in northern Lancaster County where my swim mates in the stream were heifers and dry cows, and the banks were mud and the stream was mud. And the fact that I didn't get cryptosporidium as a young kid was, I don't know, maybe my immune system had been ramped up by all of my exposure incrementally over the years. But this is not that landscape. This is Chester County with robustly healthy grass buffers. And what you're seeing is a science experiment waiting to be done. You can look at portions of streams that are in grass buffers as they start, flow into woodlots, they reemerge into grass buffers. And the question becomes, what difference does that make, whether to the stream functionality, to what's going on in the stream? What difference does it make to the stream, whether it's under trees or has grass on its bank? So 2004, Proceedings in the National Academy of Sciences. And these ecological studies are just killer. And I will say, for those of you who know what a dairy cow pasture looks like with narrow exclusion fencing, this is not, this is the best photo I had of trying to show you a grass buffer system and the kind of science we were doing in it. That is a dairy pasture. That is not the kind of grass buffer that we were talking about in Chester County, although that was not in terrible shape. So quick summary, what difference did it make, forested versus grass buffers, good, healthy grass buffers? The forested reaches, the forested sections of streams were 1.5 to 3 times wider than their grass buffered equivalents. The flow rate, the velocity of the water in the stream, was up to 2.5 times slower, meaning that it was 2.5 times faster in the grassed areas. That translates into longer residence time, longer contact with the organisms that are doing water quality protection. And this is really telling. Up to 5 times more biological activity. That's not 5%, 50%. That's 500% more biological activity, leading to up to 9 times more nitrogen uptake. A healthy, vibrant stream is sucking nitrogen out of the water because they need it to make themselves. They need it to make the proteins that create their structures, their bodies, their tissues. 4 times being typical. 2 to 5 times more phosphorus uptake. These ecological studies are highly variable. There's so many besetting covariance and other things going on. It's hard to get statistically significant results. That was not, there was a um, approximating statistical significance on the phosphorus uptake differences, but it didn't hold up at the p.05 level. And then this was a shocker for the scientists. They expected atrazine was used as a stand-in representative of a whole class of organic pesticides, organic molecule pesticides, which often are degraded by ultraviolet exposure, breaking up their chains. And they thought that we may actually lose that the forested conditions, because of the shade, may actually slow down organic molecule degradation, pesticide degradation, but they found it was actually increased in speed in the forested stream, probably because of longer residence time. It was sitting there exposed to UV longer, and shallower depths for the water, for the UV to penetrate. So it's not surprising to know that there's 5 times more biology. I mean, it is surprising. It's not surprising to figure out that that's because of better habitat. Lots of preferred foods, better stream bed condition where the life of the stream exists. It's not hard to make the leap to recognize that if we have 5 times more biological activity in forested streams, it's because of better habitat. The business of summer cool, we are all intimately familiar with, whether you're a brook trout. This is first of the year, first year of life brook trout, a mayfly, or the diatoms, which all rely on summer cool temperatures. This one surprised me when I did a lot of my learning about how streams work at Stroud when I started hobnobbing with this bunch of strange science types. If you look, yeah, okay, not surprising that summer maxima are lower for woodland streams. Do you also notice that winter minima are more moderated? And that is a real stress on organisms as well. Forested streams are warmer in the winter, measurably, than meadow streams for numbers of reasons. But for the life in the stream, that matters. Excessively cold temperatures are real stressors, even if it's not freezing. So this is the one that sort of was an aha moment for me. More habitat. Forested streams have more habitat. What do you mean, Dave? They have more habitat. They're a stream. What are you saying? There's more habitat. I would just say, remember, the life in these streams clings to surfaces, because if you don't, there's just a small group of organisms like fish who can hold their place in the stream. Other than that, if you don't hold your place in the stream, a couple of days later, you're going to be in an ecosystem that is not friendly to you, and your existence is going to be put into jeopardy. So these things hang on. They hang on to surfaces. We're looking at a stream near the Stroud lab that is about 15 to 20 feet across of wetted perimeter. That's a lot of habitat to support a lot of ecosystem services by these invisible herd organisms. This is the same stream about 100 yards upstream in a horse pasture. That photograph shows a stream that is 2 to 3 feet wide, and I'm, cherry picking my photographs to make the point. But the study found that the forested areas are 2 to 3 times wider than the grassy areas. That means 2 to 3 times more habitat per length of stream, more life, more ecological services. Never mind changes in habitat quality. We're just talking about quantity of habitat. Our former director, Bern Sweeney, made the comment. He said, it's as if by removing the forest from our streams, it's as if we have lost 2/3 of our streams in terms of habitat area. and ability to do services. So I live in northern Lancaster County. Mannheim's a small town near me. There's a project we were working at. Reed canary grass is really aggressive. So these grasses encroach, grow their roots into the stream. They trap sediment really, really well. Reed canary, and there's a reason we use this in grass waterways. It holds up to wet, and it's phenomenal at its ability to trap sediment. Streams often bridge over with reed canary grass. The stream will actually completely disappear. This one's almost there due to the full sunlight. But if you go downstream 50 yards, this is what that stream looks like. Talk about difference in, again, I picked our most dramatic examples from the slide library. But this makes the point that under canopy, without the ability of encroaching grasses, the streams are wider. There's just more habitat area. And when you're talking about whether it's a sewage treatment plant or whether it is a stream ecosystem, more surface means more biologically active beneficial organisms, means more water quality protection. And the bottom isn't the only surface area. If you look at a forested ecosystem, the amount of stuff in the channel, it's not the simple sort of barren pasture context. There's a lot of stuff going on. Here's a good graduate project. What is the effective surface area of a bank full of roots as compared to the surface area of a bare soil bank? And it's orders of magnitude more. It is there where these things are setting up shop. So here's my comment. The other half of forested buffers. The other half of forested buffers is the yellow lines. We have been looking at the blue lines for decades, saying, how effective are forested buffers at protecting water quality in terms of keeping stuff from the uplands from getting over the bank and into the stream? And the question that really has not penetrated much of our thinking about forested buffers is, what does that forested buffer do for the ecology of what's happening between the banks? Okay, so the filtering part of the buffer did its job. It eliminated half of the nitrogen. What about the in-stream services in the remaining nitrogen that gets through the buffer? And I buttonholed Bern Sweeney. I said, Bern, I've heard your talk many times. I said, what do you think is the relative magnitude of the yellow arrows for ecosystem services versus the blue arrows in terms of magnitude and importance? He said, well, it would depend on the parameters. I said, well, yeah, it depends. Everybody wears depends when they talk. He said, well, on a grand scale, he said, I would venture to guess that we are talking about, for society's reasons and values, that what is going on in the stream ecosystem is probably as important as what's going on based on the interceptive value of the buffers. So that's as far as he would pin himself down. But that is to say, it's really, really significant. And I don't think our society has really absorbed that message. Grass buffers can be really good for sediment, for example. Grass buffers are phenomenal at keeping sediment out of streams, but they're lousy for doing anything for in-stream ecosystem services for a whole bunch of reasons. Wrong inputs, light levels, whatever. Width reasons. Bern is one of our great minds at Stroud, and Dennis Newbold is I won't dare to compare them. They're both brilliant guys. They reviewed 238 papers over a 3-year period, and they looked at what does width mean to these parameters in the removal or the modification, amelioration of these conditions. And that, besides being an enormous lift, that has produce some information. So, as we talk about the blue arrows, what are buffers good for in terms of stopping what's coming in? Width matters. So a 35-foot forested buffer traps 20% of sediment by weight. A 100-foot buffer traps 48% of sediment by weight, but 52% still getting in. So we want to have some in-stream services working for us as well. And healthy streams do remove sediment. I mean, it happens in a number of different ways, including caddisfly nets and other things. But they're more than filters. And let me just go back to this. The other thing that I would point out on this thing in particular, on the sediment, is, oh, this is a nitrogen slide. My apologies. And my mind went to sediment. The interesting point about, and this is the numbers that are correct for nitrogen, and the stream does far better on nitrogen removal than it does on sediment removal. The fascinating point about the width study that Byrne did, and particularly on sediment, is the narrow buffer removed 20% of sediment. The wide forested buffer removed about half of the sediment. But critically, in that 100-foot forested buffer, the fraction of soil getting into the stream, the wide buffer was actually able to remove silts and clays at a very high proportion compared to the narrow buffer. And it's not the sands and the coarse silts that are doing the damage in the stream so much. It's the clays and the fine silts, the fine textured particles that the narrow buffers just don't deal with. So, it is to say just a little bit of a nod to the complexity of when you look at a width question. Width for temperature moderation is very different than width for sediment remediation, and it's not a linear reality. So buffers are more than filters. Then finally wrapping up, I want to be careful about time. Okay, doing all right on time, I guess. Should be wrapped up here in about 5 minutes. The unseen connections to trees. This is just the part to remind us of the complexity of the world that we are trying to manage and optimize, and the limitations of human understanding. A place like Stroud may be able to articulate a detail such as what I'm about to describe. But to have the arrogance that we think we know all of the multitude of connections that are going on in these living ecosystems with literally tens of thousands and millions of nodes and connections and interactions, it goes beyond what we are capable of, sort of engineering from the ground up. So I think what we're left with is, I think humility dictates that we approach how we do stream restoration through the lens of let's mimic healthy systems, knowing that we don't know 3/4 of really what's going on. So here's a stonefly that this is one of the top predators in a stream ecosystem. They're tigers of the bug world in the stream. The female stonefly, when she emerges as a winged adult, has to feed on the leaf, on the products of deciduous flowering trees in the watershed, or she will not become reproductively viable. Now, I don't know if that's pollen or it's nectar or what, and I don't know that's the tulip poplar. Don't get me wrong. I'm just using a deciduous flowering tree as an example. It could be red maple with their very small flowers. But there is this connection, and Byrne Sweeney articulated it, and I heard him talk about this a couple times. I said, you know what? This stuff is more complicated than my mind can begin to catalog. So there is these weird sorts of connections. So here's another one. Top left is this little gob of snot embedded with The eggs of caddisflies, one of the leading class of nymphs and larvae in a stream is the caddisfly larvae, and they turn into winged adults. They lay their eggs. There's probably 120 different caddisfly species in the Stroud Labs watershed. There's a lot of caddisflies. Um, this particular caddisfly is has the odd habit of laying its eggs on the underside of branches that span over the stream channel. The advantage being that little gelatinous globule on the underside of the branch. The larvae mature in there for a period of time. I'm not sure if it's a week or 10 days or whatever it is. And that at a point of greater maturity when they actually have mobility, they emerge and they drop into the stream itself, and they have avoided egg predators and a risk level in their early life stage when they're completely vulnerable, and now they're mobile as very young larvae, but not nearly so vulnerable as they would have been otherwise. So another one of those strange things. Burns said they were studying a stream that had it was denuded of trees for miles and miles, agricultural landscape with cattle. Could have been, could have been where I grew up as a kid. He said they went under a bridge, and the whole underside of the bridge was covered with these egg masses. It was the only overhanging structure that the caddisflies could find in, a half mile either direction was that bridge crossing. So I'm a fisherman. One of the things I value about trees is they provide fish furniture. I know where I'm going to drop my fly when you look at a situation like that. There's a really nice scour hole on the downstream side of that fish furniture. So they create a lot of depth variability. And for those of us who like brook trout, somewhere on that reverse side of that tree tangle, there's going to be a set of graded sediments from coarse to fine, along which point brook trout are going to find the size sediment they want and do their thing, which requires clean gravel to do their spawning. So I did my master's work at University of Wisconsin. Aldo Leopold was one of their great minds. One of his quotes was, "The first step in intelligent tinkering is to save all the pieces." Stroud Water Research Center agrees. The Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture agrees. If we want healthy watersheds, we're going to need trees. They are one of the critical pieces. So don't underestimate forested buffers, the in-stream services, the nitrogen removal. They work on point or non-point sources. Things that are sucking up nitrogen don't care whether it came from a package plant that's not working well, sewage plant, or if it came from a cornfield. Growing crops is leaky business, especially on nitrogen. I will also say there's a lot of great conservationists in the audience that aren't working on forested buffers as their meat and potatoes. Thank God for your work, because we can't rely on forested buffers to get conservation done and take care of our streams. We better be working on the whole landscape, including the kinds of work that Kristen was speaking of. We had Rich Shockey in Pennsylvania for NRCS sort of taking us to the woodshed. When are you guys going to get the soil health message? When are you going to get the soil health gospel at Stroud? And so we started at Rich's nonstop encouragement, shall we say. We started down that path. And the reality is, the same way that the near stream ecosystem has impacts that matter, the more distant watershed portions also are enormously important. And the difference that cover cropping, soil health, no-till agriculture, the differences that those practices can make to streams is utterly profound. And we need to be doing those practices and doing them well. Jim Hershey, who's the president of the PA No-Till Alliance, says, "David," he said, "I want to do my no-till and cover crops so well that I don't need the trees. to keep stuff out of the stream. And I said, now, Jim, you've heard the presentation. You know that the buffers as filters is only part of the deal. I said, yes, you could do your no-till well enough that you're not hemorrhaging sediment and nutrients into the stream. But what are the bugs going to eat if you don't give them the tree leaves? And he says, you got me there. So, it's the cover crop for streams. You got to feed the bugs. So there's my information. Um, I'm happy to take questions as we feel we have time, Scott, and I'll turn it back to you. I'll leave this up for a second, and then I'll turn it back, and we can take on questions as you wish.
Thank you, David. That was fascinating. I love the presentation. I don't want to take up too much time with any comments in case there are questions from the audience. So let's hear them, guys. Does anybody have a question for David while he's with us? Otherwise, I will fill in. I think your presentation has a lot of memorable components. I hope everybody took something from it. Particularly, I like the humility aspect of not thinking that we know what's going on in these incredibly complex ecosystems. I think that can sometimes happen. And also your comments about what's happening in stream in terms of a filtering capacity for water that's coming from up above, not just from the adjacent fields and whatnot, the runoff from the forest, but what's coming from the landscape above the buffer. We had the opportunity this year to receive training from some folks who are on the call here. Lydia's got her hand up, so I'll keep this brief. Where that message is really told, and I hope that in time that some of our programs will recommend and sort of acknowledge that a buffer downstream of a farm might also be effective, even though it's not on ag land.
Right.
And that gets to a lot of eligibility questions, and if we could open that up, I think we'd be doing ourselves a big favor. But having said that,
you talk about resource concerns. I mean, one could say that an impaired stream has a resource concern that doesn't need to be on a specific farm, but a buffer on that farm can address a resource concern that the farm didn't generate. It could be nitrogen from a failing sewage plant or septic systems upstream. Could be a resource concern that buffer is addressing. Had nothing to do with the producer. So
yes, exactly. Yeah. Or a non-ag rural landowner could put a buffer on their property, which is much easier to deal with nutrients coming up off a farm upstream. So, Lydia, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, David. I'm wondering.
Hey, Lydia.
I'm wondering if. So one of your slides, you had that 3 times atrazine degradation was occurring in forested watersheds, and I'm just wondering, are other pollutants also being either metabolized or taken up by biology, and what do you think it really is? Like, in the water column, is the atrazine being, metabolized some way throughout stream chemistry, or is it literally being taken up by the biology and being stored that way? That's why it's not being measured in the stream column.
Yeah, and I will say I'm at the limits of my knowledge here. I manage a watershed restoration program. We plant trees at scale. I'm not a scientist. I do some science on restoration methods, as you're aware. Stone mulch and other technologies we're trying to get into the system. But I'm at the limits of my knowledge. I would be out of my comfort zone to say I understand the mechanisms by which these things are happening. I can't articulate that. I have heard Bern Sweeney and Dr. Bern Sweeney, our former director, and others speak specifically about photodegradation of organic pesticides. That photodegradation is really an important mechanism for that. I don't know what all the mechanisms are. And I would also say, if anybody wants the full-on study, that PNAS study, that I summarized, I'm happy to get you that. It's good science. There's some really complicated and elegant graphs and metrics. What's the word I'm looking for? Diagrams. There's some really cool materials in there to help understand what this difference is between having trees or not trees on the banks of the stream. So
Thank you.